Oh boy, you ever say something on the internet that sounded smart at the time? A hot take, a savvy prediction, maybe both. But then, oh no, no. Turns out the thing you said has aged not like fine wine, but like an incorrect statement on the internet. That seems to be the case for this 2024 Twitter thread. The golden age of TTRPGs is dead. So that's tabletop role-playing games like Dungeons & Dragons, which certainly did have a mainstream explosion around the late 2010s and around the turn of the decade. And that wider popularity has settled down a bit in our post-Stranger Things world. But literally, last month, a third-party D&D publisher just blew away every record for RPG crowdfunding by raising 16 million buckaroonies. And you may recall one prediction from this old manifesto being the frequency of $1 million TTRPG Kickstarters will decrease. So, it feels like a great time about 2.5 years later to reread this thread and determine whether or not the golden age of tabletop gaming is in fact dead. It's not, it's fine. I kind of spoiled that already, I guess, but some parts of this thread have held up well, so let's check it out. First, we are not laughing at so much as with author Ben Riggs, because I really appreciate him being so bold as to make these statements and lay out predictions knowing how the internet works, sacrificing himself on the altar of commentary. And you know, hot takes are unfortunately the way to draw attention to your work, even as an author and historian like him. So good job on that front, it worked. So from the top, the golden age of TTRPGs is dead. We are watching a bright and special time in the TTRPG industry pass away before our eyes. Again, the dramatic tone is largely what made this post stand out at the time, so we'll have fun with that today. Also, he uses the exact acronym TTRPGs so many times that it grates my brain a little, and I'll occasionally be replacing it with games, but otherwise these quotes are verbatim. Around the start of the 2010s, we saw the dawn of a new golden age of tabletop role-playing games. Since then, huge numbers of new players have found the hobby thanks to Stranger Things and actual plays like Critical Role. These new fans discovered a vibrant and thrumming TTRPG industry. And he's 100% correct here. The media, specifically Stranger Things and Critical Role, gave D&D this time in the sun. Now, prepare yourself for some jargon. There was the D20 fantasy family of games dominated by D&D 5e, but rich with other games published under the OGL and the fertile depths of the old school Renaissance. Yeah, I think this thread would have gotten even more attention if the average person could have understood it. So regular viewers may know he's referring to the 20-sided die, which is emblematic of D&D, and certainly its 5th edition, which is the most popular one at the time, and emblematic of these other games published under D&D's open gaming license, which is foreshadowing for later, including modern games with an old-school D&D style. Okay, skipping ahead a little, this influx of gamers created a rising tide that lifted all boats. Novice gamers started out playing D&D 5e, yes, but went on to discover other great games. Because of the OGL, countless companies and designers could make money creating for D&D 5e. Because of the increasing number of gamers, even strange, freaky, or weird TTRPG ideas could find an audience. Have you ever heard of Apollo 47 Technical Manual the RPG? And he's 100% correct here too, nailing the history, as is Ben's actual profession. Thousands of independent writers, artists, graphic designers, editors, you name it, all these third-party D&D publishers, and really anybody publishing D20 fantasy material used this open gaming license as a layer of legal security for their products, and therefore the OGL was, foreshadowing, a foundation for these thousands of successful small businesses, whether they were writing for D&D or a freaky, weird game that's not like the other games. Recent developments make clear that this radiant golden age is ending. As surely as the Steam Age ended the Age of the Sail, or hobbits bearing a ring ended the Third Age of Middle-earth, the doom of our time approaches. In the wake of the open gaming license scandal of the past winter, a number of companies have successfully launched new TTRPGs intended to move them past the possibility of Wizards of the Coast ever threatening their businesses ever again. Okay, this scandal is the crux of his whole argument, so here's what you need to know. In January 2023, 1 year before this post, the company, Wizards of the Coast, who owns D&D and Magic the Gathering, tried to create a new open gaming license that actually would have ruined those thousands of small businesses. But they failed because those indie publishers and tens of thousands of fans rallied against them, notably by the fans canceling their online D&D subscriptions and catching some attention on mainstream news. So WotC gave up their new OGL and released the same material under a Creative Commons license, which is way more open and effectively impossible for them to revoke. Nonetheless, every RPG publisher was shook by these events, and many said, screw it, we're making our own game. So picking up the thread, some of these games grossed millions in crowdfunding campaigns. All have been positively reviewed. Some cite the success of these games, which are intended to replace 5e/OGL content for the companies involved, as signs of the continued health and growth of the TTRPG industry. They are not. Rather, they are signs that the industry has peaked and may be about to enter a decline. Why? And can I just say, this is like the format of the internet today. Maybe he was a little early to this, I feel like, 2.5 years ago. Oh, thing you think is good is actually bad. Like that is the main way to get people to click on your stuff, I guess. So where were we? Why? He answers after we skip a lot of repetitive tweets. The problem is, 5e was not just a game. It was a massive community of players. Countless companies could thrive making products for that community. These new games are a shattering of that community. Instead of countless companies working to make your 5e game better, they are now asking you to become MCDM or Darrington Press or Paizo or D&D 6e players. We are entering an era of division, faction, and balkanization. The companies are now asking fans to choose sides. It also means that it is going to become more difficult for them to share customers. How interested will a Pathfinder fan be in an MCDM product or 6th edition? History suggests these sorts of barriers depress sales. And this isn't entirely wrong. I too believed when the OGL scandal first broke that the best case scenario would be an Avengers Endgame style team up of small and mid-sized publishers creating their own new D20 core rules system to rally behind and branch off in their own games that would all be kinda more or less compatible and use the same license. Cause that would maintain this tight-knit but huge community of RPG fans that I'm very much a part of. But what I didn't consider, and what Ben didn't consider or ignored as the possibility here, is that this RPG pie was so big that shattering it still leaves pretty big pieces of pie for everybody. And heck, the whole pie can still grow as new players come in and as people face the radical notion, I can play more than one game? Furthermore, the part he completely ignored that I still don't think gets enough attention from anybody today is how this event did seem to wipe out entry-level jobs in tabletop RPGs. Frankly, I do not have data on this, and it seems like things have more or less recovered, but for the first year or so after that OGL scandal, it really felt like the only indie publishers still making money were the mid-sized companies already raising hundreds of thousands of dollars on Kickstarter. Meanwhile, hundreds, if not thousands, of freelance game designers and artists suffered for a while. One dungeon tuber, Trek Heroes, made a great video related to this subtopic about the Dungeon Masters Guild D&D marketplace and how it no longer functions as an entry point to the industry. So if you're interested, I will link that video in the description. But as you can tell by Ben's last statement we read, history suggests these sorts of barriers to press sales, he was about to go full historian mode, which is pretty interesting, and then goes way out of his wheelhouse about D&D YouTube, which is entertaining, and then he gets to the salient predictions we have truly come here to judge. But first, one awesome indie publisher has a quick word and a deal for you. Today's sponsor, Roll for Your Life. A gorgeously illustrated activity book full of random tables for creating your own characters, locations, items, and stories. The fantasy section helps you detail bizarre wizards from their beard length to their home to their motivation, with more inspiring chapters for memorable taverns, one-of-a-kind dragons, weird witches, and dungeons. But there's also a sci-fi section with aliens, starships, mutants, and more, and a multi-genre section called Adventure for creating characters from the Wild West to spy thrillers, and several of these include tables for outlining stories you can play out. If you couldn't tell, Roll for Your Life is system neutral, and while it has super simple rules to gamify the rolling experience, the book stands out to me for not trying to be an optimized zero prep game master tool. It's a fun book that anyone could page through to get a feel for the creative side of RPGs, or that GMs can use to design their own awesome material. And for a limited time, you, lucky viewer, can get 20% off with code BOBROLLS26. So check out Roll for Your Life through the link below. All right, through a cascade of tweets, RPG historian Ben Riggs describes how all this has happened before. The original owners of Dungeons & Dragons published so many campaign worlds in the 90s that it fractured their customer base. Fans stopped being fans of D&D and instead became fans of a particular setting and would only buy products for that setting. Now, he definitely knows better than I, having written a few books on the subject, but I'm pretty sure the downfall of this company was a lot more complicated than fans only wanting to play and buy products for a specific campaign setting. If that were the big problem, D&D could have stopped making new settings and just produced new material for each existing setting, favoring the ones that customers liked and played the most. In any case, he continues, some might say it is unfair to compare the different settings of the 90s to the different systems of today. Settings and systems are different after all, and I do agree with that point. Lowers sunglasses. Switching systems is a bigger ask than switching settings, therefore this change should have a larger impact on sales. Another pretty good setup just to subvert the expectation, but really, no. I think starting a new campaign and learning the ins and outs of a whole new world is not easier than learning a new game system. It's just going to differ from person to person. And then we repeat some points about fracturing and competition that feel a little too contradictory. To focus only on MCDM, this current backer kit is likely the most successful campaign the company will ever see. A little more jargon. We're done talking about campaign settings. This references a crowdfunding campaign by publisher MCDM that broke records for the launch of their own fantasy RPG just a couple weeks before this post. So he's making sense that every campaign after this will struggle to get the same sort of sales numbers. Yeah, you can't expect them to break records every time they publish something, but he says the reason for decreasing sales will be people slowly bleed away to the competition. Paizo, another RPG publisher, will say, check out our competing fantasy game. And now, literally and figuratively, I wish I had my own sunglasses to say, so wait, Ben, where are the fans bleeding away to? Like if MCDM's fans all bleed away to Paizo, which they won't, they're still supporting one of these companies that you say can't survive in this fractured industry. Like we realized earlier, people can play more than one game. We don't all have to choose one publisher who will become the next D&D, and we shouldn't. Look where all that consolidation of power got us. We're lucky that the OGL scandal broke the way it did, such that so many smaller publishers were ready and able to pick up the pieces. Earlier in the 1990s history lesson, he says, D&D was only saved from a terrible fate by Wizards of the Coast and their fat stacks of cash they purchased TSR in the summer of 1997. So in Ben's perfect world, the 2023 license scandal would have ended with, I don't know, Hasbro selling the brand to Microsoft, who then publishes cruddy content until they sell it to someone else. I much prefer this timeline where MCDM, Paizo, and other publishers have to make great fantasy game material in order to earn their piece of the pie. Gotta remember, we're reading this for fun, and it's a, moderately successful Twitter thread. Therefore, it is to some degree rage bait, and I can't let it get the best of me. But this section on D&D YouTube is so dumb. Furthermore, what will happen to the YouTube channel that is the foundation of MCDM's success? Matt Colville is a master communicator and was a major evangelist for D&D in his channel's heyday. Whoa, Ben, it'll be okay, dude. I mean, he is passionate, intelligent, and inspiring. If Dungeon Masters could go into the locker room and get a pep talk from their coach in the middle of a game of D&D, that coach would be Matt Colville. Ben, his videos are still on YouTube. You could still go back and watch any of them. How much time is Colville going to devote to D&D now that it is essentially his competition? In the past year, he has put out less than 20 videos on his channel. Ben, you do know it's not just Colville, right? There are hundreds of RPG channels. Those videos now range widely in topic, from TV reviews and interviews with language scholars to some D&D content and a discussion of the creation of his new RPG. I'm starting to feel like the whole point of this thread was to vent about missing Matt Colville's D&D videos? Go back 5 years and Colville was putting out video after video after video of fantastic advice about running D&D, usually with 5e as the default. He dispensed some of the best advice on TTRPGs I have ever seen. Okay, Ben, I know Matt wouldn't mind when I say other YouTubers give very similar advice, like even passed down from him, and some of these newer creators, not talking about me, reach way more people than Colville ever did. Let's look at MCDM's recent efforts from the point of view of Wizard of the Coast. It is all ruin, disaster, and calamity. Master communicator and D&D fanatic Matt Colville has gone from convincing people to try D&D and explaining how to best play D&D to instead asking his 439,000 subscribers to stop playing D&D and to play his game instead. Enough. You already know from looking at his record-breaking crowdfunding campaign that 30,000 people backed it. That is huge, but it's nowhere near his 440,000 subscribers. Sadly, for YouTubers everywhere, even master communicator and D&D fanatic Matt Colville can only convert, 7% of his audience on a really good day. So when you continue, quote, Critical Role is likewise stopping their support of D&D, which is straight up false, and asking their 2.1 million YouTube subscribers to start playing one of their 2 new games instead. Yeah, when you say that, you know that means maybe 100,000 or 200,000 people, which is, to be fair, freaking incredible for any RPG publisher, but it's still not a threat to the estimated 10 million active D&D players today. So skipping the rest of the blatantly false stuff about Critical Role and YouTube, here's the juiciest part of the post. Okay, nature break for this teeny tiny, baby rabbit that I just spooked down the trail ahead of me, scratching his big old ears. I don't really have a fun fact about these guys besides to say something funny I remember from a nature guide, reading this years ago. It called them the hamburgers of the wild because everything eats them. So run, little man. What the future might look like. And if I'm right, and this is how the golden age of TTRPGs dies, certain things follow naturally from these events. Here are my predictions, prophecies that I may be held accountable for my rashness in writing all this down. Once more, thanks for being rash, we're having a good time. I may be wrong, but if I'm right, the following things seem likely to pass. 1. 6th edition will not do as well as 5th edition. Wow, dude. Super limp take here. Oh no, the reboot won't do as well as the most popular edition of a tabletop RPG to ever exist? We know. 2. Even more firings will follow. Yes and no. A year after this, D&D fired the team who built its already defunct virtual tabletop. However, this year, they just hired 4 new designers for the real tabletop game, who will hopefully start bringing in some fresh ideas after this Ravenloft season is over. 3. Wizards, which struggled to know what to do with D&D when it was a success, no Honor Among Thieves starter set, really? Will be flummoxed by what to do with it when it is perceived as a failure. Yeah, maybe. Not any specific claim here, though I agree that a box set for the movie would have been smart. Overall, I think D&D's best work happened when they were not the golden goose, but it remains to be seen whether or not they'll do that again. 4. No MCDM RPG crowdfunding campaign will ever do better than this initial campaign to fund its TTRPG. Yeah, I already touched on this being totally normal, but I will point to an outlier. Shadow Dark RPG's initial campaign made about $1 million in 2023, right after the OGL scandal, so well before this post, and its second campaign, which is literally a campaign setting for the game, raised about twice the initial funding. Notably, Shadow Dark is never mentioned in this thread, and I can only assume it's because, since the game launched, it has steadily progressed in the exact opposite direction of these claims. And I'm probably biased because it's my favorite of the, D&D killers that came out of this whole scandal, but instead of taking D&D in a crunchier direction, like Draw Steel and like DC-20, and like how Pathfinder 2e maintained its distinction from 5th edition, Shadow Dark moved in the opposite direction. So I think it appeals to a whole group of people who like 5e, but just like the core. Again, maybe I'm projecting because I don't know why most people actually like it, but in a nutshell, that's why I like it. 5. Kobold Press's post-OGL game, Tales of the Valiant, has been criticized for being too similar to 5e. For Kobold Press, I see two futures. Perhaps they will slowly bleed fans in the same way that MCDM will, but if D&D 6th edition is too different and people really don't want to move on from 5e, Kobold has positioned themselves to be the next Paizo and Tales of the Valiant, the next Pathfinder. Low-key, he might have nailed this, and maybe I'm just projecting again, because I personally am not tuned into this game, but I feel like the rules did land in a weird spot, not familiar enough or new enough for a huge audience anyway to latch on. 6. Here we go. The frequency of $1 million TTRPG Kickstarters will decrease. First, who cares? I stand by my video from last year where I looked at every single TTRPG crowdfunding campaign from 2014 through 2024 that earned over $100,000 when I said that earning over $1 million is a really poor benchmark because there is almost zero data at that level of funding. Regardless, we have concrete numbers for this one. 2014 to 2020, basically 0 campaigns hitting $1 million, then suddenly 2021, 11, 2022, 7, 2023, 9. So, already on a somewhat downward trend when he made this prediction in January of 2024, but 2024 back up to 10, 2025, 11, and currently only halfway through 2026, already 8 $1 million TTRPG campaigns, including Neon Odyssey referenced at the intro, which just became the #1 TTRPG crowdfunding campaign of all time with $16 million. Like, even ignoring frequency of $1 million campaigns, I think total funds have increased substantially because of these outliers. Probably due for a new video analyzing the Kickstarter side of the industry. And at worst, this frequency stat has been consistent from 2021, 2 years before the OGL scandal, 3 years before this post, and we got 2 more predictions. 7. Attendance at major gaming conventions will plateau. And he might have been a little tricky with this one, because we have attendance numbers for Gen Con, the biggest tabletop gaming convention in the US, peaking around 70,000 in 2019, then recovering from 0 between 2020 and 2023, and yeah, plateauing right around 70,000 for these last few years. But according to some light research, I did not do much digging here, this seems to be because 70,000 people descending on the city of Indianapolis for 1 week every August is literally the maximum number of guests it can possibly sustain, at least until they build some more hotels and expand the convention center or something. Outside of Gen Con, there are unfortunately no public numbers from what I believe to be the next biggest tabletop con, PAX Unplugged in Philadelphia, But on a much smaller scale, the Philadelphia Area Gaming Expo has increased attendance every year since it started in January 2024, when this post was published, at about 1,000, then about 2,000 the next year, then about 3,000 people in its third year. That's a lot of growth. Finally, prediction number 8, super subjective and immeasurable. TTRPGs will become less interesting, less exciting, less creative, and despite all the new systems, it will grow less diverse as it becomes even harder to make money in a TTRPG community broken into factions. And so, a golden age ends, sputters out. Crazy spot for a typo. Unless something truly dramatic and game-changing hits the industry. What could change this grim future? I suppose a group of publishers coalescing around a single system might change matters. Which we discussed would be interesting, but probably not like the best case scenario for us. Or something truly inconceivable. Something like giving 6th edition D&D an OGL or putting the rules in the Creative Commons. Which was already promised by WotC when he made this post and has since happened despite it being, quote, truly inconceivable. So I don't know if that was just like more rage bait or what. And I really can't wait to revisit some of these claims another couple years down the line. This is such a fascinating record of what some people were feeling at that time, and some people are still feeling today. You know, last week I had a joke in my script about how, isn't it funny that D&D is over every 3 weeks for the last 3 years? And while editing that video, I checked and saw that very day a brand new D&D is over, officially for real this time, thumbnail and title from everyone's favorite D&D Doomsayer. No hate on them either. At this point, like Ben's thread, I think it's pure entertainment for some people. It's just funny to me how that talking point persists in the face of hard data, and even being real for a second, during weirdly turbulent economic times when stocks are higher than ever, but the average person is really feeling a squeeze. They're still spending on games, and it's all growing. In other words, it would make more sense to me if the golden age of TTRPGs was ending, but for the foreseeable future, line go up. So thank you to my wonderful patrons and YouTube members who keep my line stable. Keep building.